Welcome to Flat Earth Debate, Uncut and After Show. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they premiere. There's also a PayPal, Patreon, and crypto link in the info box below the video. Speaking of Patreon, I'll give you a quick shout out to all of you who do support me on Patreon. So a massive shout out of thanks and appreciation to Guns of Navarone, RMP, Troy Shuker, Bose Nail, Joseph Pizarro, Samson, Maris, Mobile Max 777, Neo the One, Lost Cat FE, Rob W, Open Minded, Reese Pound, Del West Watson, Mike, Muted, Dick Earth Skeptic, NA Literalist, Maria Neelands, Unbelievable Productions, Blue Ridge Ranger, Rob H, The Real Gabster, Windrider, Liam Nedrick, Abraham Mohammed, Dave Rakia Gafford, Naibai, Adrian Quintana, Skeptic936, Life is Short, Fireball X, Texas Mike, Edwin Johnson, Kirsten Smith, Alexander Main, and David Wayne Foster. So another massive thank you to all of you for supporting me on Patreon. I'm going to raise the mic on Discord and Google so you can enjoy the conversation of whoever is in there while I set up for today's live show.
Taking unorthodox through the 3 points thing they got.
Is Miggy's the guy who got a mention on the last Ballbusters, right? He's got his own
That's
top
correct.
3. Yeah, okay, carry on.
And it was just hilarious because, Wiggles was on there like 2 days before that. And if you want to see somebody squirm, that has to be the 2 squirmiest people I've ever seen in my life. They couldn't even give a direct answer to anyone, like just asking them how it was measured, you know?
We're familiar with what's his name? Who was that guy you just mentioned? Wiggles?
Yeah, Wiggles.
We know who he is. He's a meatball.
I used to talk to Wiggles quite a bit when I was a Glober. I'd feed him information, I guess.
Like what?
Usually it was just like formulas, things like that. Never really an argument. Looking back on it, there is no argument.
Did he ever use any of it?
No, I don't think so. Like, I'm sure there were several other people sending him instant messages too.
It just gave him wiggle room.
What was it he said that was really stupid? Wiggles.
He said a lot of things that are really stupid. So when we were arguing
It's a long
about
list.
when we were arguing about the Earth curve calculator, he held up a Rubik's Cube and said, look, this is a 3-inch Rubik's Cube, and then pulled it massively away from the camera and said, look, it's still a 3-inch Rubik's Cube. And it's like, yeah, that's right. That's how your maths works. Doesn't matter that it's got much smaller. It's still 3 inches, which means that you can assign that 3-inch Rubik's Cube a distance of 1,000,000 miles and it'll still be 3 inches and capable of being seen. No, of course not. So that's just one in a many long list of things that he said that are stupid.
Oh, he said that there was many scientific methods. He said there was as many scientific methods as there are people. I couldn't believe that.
You mean you can't see the Eiffel Tower from New York?
You know, I noticed something about that. If you ever ask someone where they live and they point, they never point down at the ground. You know what I mean? Like, no matter how far away it is, if you ask them what direction their home is, they always point to the horizon, never down at the ground.
Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2.
You're good, Tenth. You're good. Good morning.
So tell us more what happened yesterday then, because that's how this conversation started, John.
It got pretty bad. Unorthodox ended up saying that he couldn't prove that he wasn't a brain in a jar, that he couldn't know anything for certain, or the only thing he knew is he couldn't know anything, and he was certain that he couldn't know anything with certainty. He just fell apart. It was like he never made it past the first question. They just asked him, when was Earth curve measured, and what was the methodology done to do it? And I don't think he ever answered the question. He just started, barking off philosophy.
I assume he knows
Did
your
he say-
position. You said you were speaking to him reasonably frequently before converting. I don't know what word to use there, sorry. So presumably he knows your position, right?
I'm still trying to think how I thought back then.
That's what I mean.
That was back when R was something tangible
that's not what I mean.
and measurable.
I mean, does Wiggles know your position has changed, given that you used to talk to him quite frequently from a globe point of view, and now you're obviously not?
I don't even think he remembers me. If he does, he's forced it out of his mind.
John, you don't have a forgettable voice. He knows exactly who you are.
Well, I never spoke before. I just typed messages.
Right,
I
so
guess-
they may not know who you are. Fair enough.
Can I get a sound check?
Hey, 10th, can you hear us?
Yeah, finally. I guess I've been talking and no one's responding. I'm going, what's going on here?
We heard you, though, because you were...
Oh, you did?
I responded to you.
We responded, you
I
just
didn't hear
hear.
it. Yeah, all right. Well, it's working now. For some reason, I've had to turn it on off 2 days in a row and reboot. So hang on, I caught the end of that. So Unorthodox thinks he doesn't know if he's a brain in a jar?
He said that he is certain that no one can have certainty. And he's
Well, how
certain.
can he be certain if he can't have certainty? How can he be certain of it?
It's a contradiction.
Yeah. And he's like, you can't prove you're not a brain in a jar, like, why would I have to prove that?
I'm sick of hearing shit like that. My son throws that at me all the time. I'm tired of that philosophy nonsense. Let's stop being idiots and let's deal with reality.
Well,
yeah, that's
it
the
comes to
problem.
the knowledge claim.
No, they're utilising that as a defence when they lose. So, when they lose, from a point of view of their philosophical reasonings that we're on a sphere, they say, well, by the standard that I've lost on, that would be a standard that they're trying to fight for, a philosophical standard. They say, well, from a philosophical point of view, you can't tell if I'm just a brain in a jar, this is just all the Matrix, and I wouldn't know any different. Like, what a crap get out. That's your response to the argument when they've lost.
Yeah, I remember talking to atheists and they're saying, well, there are no absolutes. I go, are you absolutely sure?
Exactly.
The same
It's
thing.
exactly the same thing, precisely. Yeah, I'll make an absolute all-encompassing statement about things not being absolute, because that's not in the slightest bit contradictory.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but it's a
Oh, sorry.
cop-out for sure. No, it's all right. I'm just agreeing with Nathan that, when someone reaches the end of a debate or the ropes, it's used as a cop-out. So I agree with that.
When you're making claims, though, knowledge is, necessary to make claims. If you don't know anything, you can't make claims of knowledge. So why are they even trying to speak?
You bring up a good point. If they don't know anything and nothing can be known, why are they debating about stuff?
Because when you've got a loss on your hand, it's better to take that loss and turn it into a draw.
Was it Descartes said, I think, therefore I am?
Indeed.
Okay. Someone prior to him said, I doubt, therefore I know I am. So very similar.
Who's that? Plato?
No, it was, what's his name? He'll come to me in a minute. I'll even find a quote for you. But that whole point of that experience you're having is enough that you are experiencing something, that you are real. You can't doubt if you're not alive. You can't doubt, right? You can't doubt, I guess is what they say. You have to be doubting to doubt.
But that can be taken two ways. I think, therefore, I am can be interpreted two ways.
You back off your mic
All
a little
right.
bit, or turn the gain down, one or the other, John. You're just much louder than everyone else. I can't control people's
Oh, sorry.
volumes in G+. Unfortunately, there's no control over it. So individually, you all have to kind of match, just of your own volition.
If I hold it back here, is that better?
Perfect.
All right. Yeah, I think, therefore, I am could be interpreted. I think, therefore, I am exists, or I think, therefore, I am the I am.
Well, that's taking it to a whole different level, because only God is the I am, because he never had a beginning. That's why he said, I am that I am.
Well, not in other religions. That's why it's used as a statement of what is.
Give me an example.
Or don't, because this, generally speaking, our standard isn't a philosophical standard. We just argue against a philosophical standard all day long.
Well, I mean, people nowadays think they're one with the universe, right? And that, like Michelle Thaler, the rock is my cousin. This is where it's going. Everything is God.
Yeah, that's the other side of it.
Yeah, that's what they're doing. They're
Right, but here we work on the really is level, right?
correct.
Well, if we're working on the really is level, then we're working on the really is level, and we're arguing against philosophy. And it's interesting to pull apart some of the alternative philosophies they throw in our face when they lose, when defending their philosophy of a ball earth beneath their feet. But to me, it's like, yeah, we end up looking into these philosophies merely because they're offered up in rebuttal. That's the only reason I end up looking at these other alternative philosophies. I don't know about you. It just doesn't interest me. I don't know. Does it interest you? When I found out the globe earth was a philosophy, I kind of lost all interest in it. It's kind of the reverse. You end up, finding yourself researching various philosophies, and you're like, I'm not interested in any of this.
Yeah, I agree with that. I go about it a different way. I go about a more spiritual base to it. I know that there's a creator. I know nothing came from nothing. There had to be a designer for this incredible world we live in. Just the anatomy of the body tells me. And so I look up. I look up and pray. I ask God. I talk to God. And someone may call that my philosophy, I guess. But I don't look to man. I don't look to creation for the answer.
When Thrice-8 Hermes describes it as other men trying to force their models on you. That's all I see it as.
That's a good way of putting it.
Hey, Brian.
Hey, Nathan.
Hey, Brian.
What's going on? How are you all?
Very well.
We're trying to figure out if some glober is a brain in a jar or not.
Brain in a jar.
Our sentiments exactly.
The way you said that was classic.
Yeah, the Matrix, basically. You were part of the Matrix. You all seen the Matrix, right? Most people have seen the Matrix. Well, when you get to the second and third movie, they introduce a second layer of the Matrix called Zion. Well, in the same way that the people who are inside the Matrix don't know they're in the Matrix, that's no different to not knowing that you're in the Matrix when you're in Zion. Make sense?
Yeah.
Well, therefore, on both levels, even though on one level they're implying that you've woken up from a dream in this little bubble that a machine's kept you in, that could also just be part of the same simulation. And then it becomes fractal in terms of how it would be described. And that particular description, where you have Zion claimed to be the real world, actually also a simulation, is a what's the fallacy? It's used in religion. An infinite regress fallacy. There you go.
So Zion could just be another matrix kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a way of utilizing something called the infinite regress fallacy.
Even within the movie, it was another control structure.
Yeah, that's explained by the architect in the second movie.
Good morning.
Hey, Elijah. You two, can you back off your mic just a little bit, Elijah?
Hey, Elijah.
Yeah, I've recommended this channel a couple of times, but Matrix Explained does a really good job of editing together the videos and pulling apart the philosophies of the Matrix. And what surprises me is when I'm listening to him that he doesn't see the overlap between the world he's living in, because it's not directly comparable to a dream world Matrix where people are waking up with agents. It's obviously, far-fetched from that respect, but there are many, many, many parallels that I draw and he doesn't, but obviously he's got a channel that he's trying to build up with a sort of mainstream-ish representation of the film and his dissection of it, which is more power to him. But for a guy so insightful, maybe he doesn't, I'm just divining his thoughts here, but, maybe he actually very much reads between the lines, just doesn't make videos about that particular aspect of it and draw the parallels with the real world. He does in a vague way occasionally, but not enough for me to think, yeah, that's how I'll use that point, because it isn't.
Well, we got our own in-house Matrix expert, Elijah.
Didn't know you were into it. Most people who come to this arena tend to be into Matrix, right?
Well, yeah, in the sense that there's another author of the movie, and that like some of the main takeaways that we get from the movie wasn't the originator's intent. So that's kind of what I'm into.
Okay, so us reading between the lines and it not being the lines that are written.
By the originator.
When you say the originator, you mean the Wachowskis?
No, the originator is this guy. His name is Tom Althouse, and he has a lot of hard evidence to suggest that some effery is afoot.
It's a hodgepodge of all sorts of things, like Ghost in a Shell and Simulacra and Simulation, about a dozen or more different philosophies that are portrayed as the archetype characters. They embody particular philosophies. So there's all sorts of different narratives going on. But this guy's claiming that the overall bare bones of the story is his, right? Prior to the Wachowskis adapting a lot of manga and philosophy, basically.
Yeah. Let's see. I guess the takeaway from the three movies in total, like you kind of sat there thinking, well, were there multiple writers? How come certain things don't seem to sync up the way I would like it to as a Matrix, fan? One of the major differences between what the Wachowskis put out and what this guy was trying to portray is the relationship between Smith and Neo. And even, well, I'm gonna just go to a totally different point now. The little girl in the train station scene, that's supposed to be Neo's daughter, and she's supposed to get killed like by fire, but then she's saved by someone that Neo thinks is Agent Smith. Come to find out, it's actually Jesus.
Okay, you're talking about Sati. So Sati is a program that a systems level programmer basically gives up his life for, and he hides her in Central Ave, the train man's halfway house between what you could consider the Nightmare Matrix, which they called Zion, and the normal Matrix. Well, that guy presumably was something like the architect or something similar from a previous version of the Matrix. And that girl, you see at the very end of the third film, creating the sunrise. So that's part of her. That's what she does. She's got a function in the rebooted Matrix after Neo sacrifices himself by going to the source and seeing Ex Machina in front of him with like all the different sentinels all making a face. Well, she's basically only there because let me get this straight, to get Neo to go and visit the Merovingian, to get the Keymaker so that he could go back to the source, which is entirely the intent and intentions of the machines, not the people. That's what they want him to do, right? But to make it seem like he's got some sort of adversity, he's got to get to the Keymaker to do that, and the Merovingian holds control over him. And just before he gets there, you see the guy who he meets in Mobile Ave, or Central Ave, or whatever it's called, the underground train station. You see him walking off after having a meeting with the Merovingian, and the Merovingian controls the train man, which is where Sati was hiding, so that when the Matrix is rebooted, she can still survive, and then make a sunrise.
Extremely Gnostic in its structure.
Oh, very much so. I mean, Neo and Agent Smith are supposed to be like opposites to each other.
Yin and Yang.
Well, Smith is about inevitability, and Neo's more about choice. So Neo's under the misapprehension that he's got a choice in things and he can control his destiny, whereas Smith is of the opinion that everything is down to inevitability. So they're completely contrasting. So yeah, they're a yin and yang. They're also part of one another. You know what I mean? Also, it could be argued that Smith is the integral anomaly, because he's the one destroying the Matrix towards the end, and it has to be him that's inhabiting Neo's body in order for that to be part of the... it's actually at the point where Smith is taken into the... the Ex Machina, because he inhabits Neo's body, and then the Matrix reloads, which you could argue very easily that Smith is the integral anomaly, not Neo. Neo's just a pawn to be put into the Machine City so that Smith can put his program back into the machine to reboot it, because that's the point that it reboots, right? Because if you think about it, when Neo gets to the Machine City, he's already plugged up to the system at the Machine City. Well, wouldn't it just reload if he's got the system key or whatever it is that's supposed to reboot it in him? It would just reload automatically, wouldn't it? That's all they need. They just need the key to be returned to the source. So he returns to the source and nothing happens. He fights Smith. Then Smith becomes part of Neo and then it reboots. So by that standard, well, who's the integral anomaly with the reboot code? Well, it's Smith. And Smith's the one that's threatening to destroy the entire Matrix. He takes it over. So Smith's the one, not Neo. Or at least Smith's got the code to reboot the program. And he doesn't do it. And he should have done it when he dies. So he says in the second one, when he meets with Neo at the park after meeting with the Oracle, he says that he was compelled to stay. Oh, I knew what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to go back to the source. All right, so he didn't go back to the source. He stayed. And now in order for the source to actually have the reboot program, you've got to be inhabiting a body that's attached to the source. Again, that it all implies that he's the one with the code to reboot the program, not Neo. Or just reboot as soon as he got there. And he didn't.
But he also says Neo imprinted himself onto him.
Back off your mic a little bit. Say again.
He said that Neo imprinted himself onto him.
Yeah, he did, yeah. He doesn't know, though. He just guesses. Maybe something from you imprinted onto me, I don't know. He doesn't know what happens. He's just guessing. All he knows is it happened for a reason. That's the only thing he knows. But that's all about his archetype, right? He's all about inevitability.
Yeah, the demiurge and the architect are the same thing in that.
Say that again, John, sorry.
The architect is the demiurge in that story. Like the manifestation of Sophia.
Right.
So does that make the oracle Sophia? And she actually created the architect?
Well, they're symbiotic, I think. They're the opposites within the machine context. So she even says that. So the architect's there to make the equation beautiful and balanced, and she's there to unbalance it. She specifically says that.
I have to say something that, and I won't be popular for saying it, but I didn't like the movies.
Get out.
I couldn't even,
Get out.
I couldn't even watch the third one. It done me head in completely. There was so much nonsense in the three movies. Too much romantic nonsense, and they did it. They even did, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as they do it the right way. But they did it the wrong way. There's some good action. I got through the second one. Third one, I had to go right. This is over because there was some rave in the third one, and it's like, nah. I grew up going to raves. That wasn't a rave. Do you know what I mean?
Brian, listen to me. Romance is nice. Trust me.
It's not but I'm not saying that. My point is that there was mockness in there. It was nonsense. There was I'm not going to say a statement, a really cringy statement made in the second one by what's the Italian actress's name? Dark-haired woman. Can't remember her name now, but she made a statement in it. It was terrible. I couldn't. The premise of it was brilliant. The premise that there's a matrix. Yeah, it's the globe. Globe is the matrix. There we know. But I couldn't get through them. I'm sorry. If you want me to leave, I will.
The globe's not the matrix. The globe is just part of the matrix. It's just the setting. Like saying the city that you see all green inside the actual matrix is the setting where things take place, but the control structures and things like that aren't comparable to the globe. Yeah, it's just another system of control, but it's a much more broad comparison, in my opinion. You know, there's a lot more to society that's comparable to the matrix than just the globe lie.
Yeah, but the globe at its fundamentals is just a load of numbers. And that's all the matrix is too. It's just a load and robots. That's all the globe is. Robots and numbers. You know, mathematics and robots. That's what we deal with.
Right.
So I understand, Jay, there's more than that maybe to it, but maybe I'm a bit simplistic about it.
I don't think anybody would agree.
Well, see, if you think about the Agent Smiths, is my audio okay? I might switch to Discord if that'll help.
No, you're good. You're good.
Control it. So, like the Agent Smiths, they're not necessarily like robots, right? Because they could have given them the likeness of like androids or cyborgs or something. But what they did was give them this, this office security kind of look. The meatheads with the earpiece in their ear. Because that's how people act. They take on their roles rather than, assessing the situation as an individual. So.
Yeah, Agent Smiths. We deal with our own Agent Smiths, don't we? I mean, is Rumpus not the ultimate Agent Smith?
Well, they also point out that anybody could be an agent. In other words, if you're in a position to be fighting for a cause that's not in line with the control structure, then any individual person who's very much ingrained in the matrix can become an agent. And that is something we see often. That's why you get people saying that person's a shill, this person's a controlled opposition agent, that person's paid. Well, the reason they say those things is because part of the system indoctrinates all of its inhabitants into being able, at a subconscious level, to draw from certain fallacies, certain ideas, certain philosophies in defense of the system that they are part of, because they believe it to be their world at a base level. So they just assume that's correct at a starting point, and therefore can defend it like an agent at any point, should there ever be a challenge raised to it. Now that's it's almost instinctual. You know, it's not even been, in our opinion, a great deal of time that this philosophy has been part of the Western worldview, but it's still almost instinctual when people come to the subject that they will defend it like an agent inhabiting their body.
I personally like the Terminator movies more as a kind of a prophecy movies. The Terminator movies, in some ways, I prefer them. Although they don't talk about a Matrix.
You mean like
What?
I like the Terminator too.
in the sense that there's like some unforeseen hand that's actually controlling us. Like it sounds crazy, but sometimes I feel like we're already taken over by robots and we just don't realize it because we're a slave to our technology and all of this.
Yeah,
You know, we look at numbers and we're like, yeah, that's our reality.
That's true.
You know, there is a Skynet. Skynet, there is actually a corporation called Skynet in the world today. There's a lot of strange stuff in the Matrix or the Terminator movies.
Yeah.
That points to a kind of a future. I'm not saying we're going to be taken over by machines, but it points to a future that's a bit more controlling than we'd like, put it that way.
And to add to your previous point, Nathan, about like, you know, agents in the system, it's true because I used to take a certain tack with globe earthers until I realized I saw a little bit of rumpus in some of my family members. And I was like, how the hell do you know to react or respond in that way with those words? Like, what have you been watching? But I guess it's just a byproduct of being a part of the system.
Exactly. And it's useful, you know, if we're divided with our fellow man, in this case an opponent that believes they're on a sphere still, then that's part of the Hegelian dialectic, if I could say it. Divide and rule.
I think it's a case of like even comments from ballers. I got a comment earlier from a baller who stated that the latitude and longitude grid came because the Earth has been measured as a globe and they knew it was a globe. And that's how the latitude longitude grid comes into play. And it has nothing to do with mathematical conversions from Cartesian coordinates. It's like, now, whether he's done research or not, he's still going to come back with that. Regardless of black swans, anything, that's where he's at. So
it's just not right. It's just incorrect, though.
Outright no. Sorry,
yeah, it's just wrong. You know, people with their limited understanding of how Earth is measured and their assumption because a geodetic surveyor tells them, well, we obviously start with it being a sphere because it is, and then we measure it flat. You know, they don't mention that, well, then we measure it flat bit, although they'll detail the actual process. They'll even detail that they're using Cartesian coordinate systems, but they're measuring it from a tangent plane. So long as the assumption of a sphere is in place before you measure anything flat, then everyone who is assessing that information will say, well, they're starting with the sphere anyway. It's got to be a sphere because they're starting with it on a sphere. Like, yeah, but then they're measuring it flat. So beyond the assumption of sphericity, they don't actually do anything that's spherical when they measure it. They measure it flat. So it's measured flat. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, exactly. He started his comment to me with, no, you've got it backwards. So when you're dealing with that level of, it's just like all I can see is two letters, then a big, huge word, no. No is what I hear from that. That means, no, I'm not going to deal with reality. I'm just going to go with what I want to be real, regardless of any research.
Yeah, no, your explanation debunks my worldview. Therefore, as you put it, no. What do you mean, no? No, it is actually assumed to be a sphere. It's measured as a tangent plane. They take a tangent measurement, refer to a model, and then say you're at this point on a sphere. Then they measure it flat. So they assume a sphere, but don't do anything with the assumption. In other words, they're not taking any considerations for the spherical assumption they've made. They just go ahead and measure it flat. Well, what's that? Wrong way around? No, they assume that they're on a plane and then measure the spherical nature of it. No, they don't.
Yeah, I put that quote in Master B. It was Augustine.
Augustine.
Plus, so I put also Descartes as well underneath them.
I got it up. Augustine's quote. Did you want to read it just before we go live or not? I doubt, therefore I am.
Yeah, I can read it. He says, doubt is important. St. Augustine used doubt as a starting point to break through the conundrum of skeptics. Greek philosophy had become hung up on the skeptics' insistence that everything must be doubted, and therefore it was impossible to know anything for sure. We must even be skeptical of our own existence. Considering this problem, Augustine finally experienced a eureka moment when he said, I can doubt all things, but I cannot doubt that I'm doubting. Pretty clever.
Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon, and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live. There's also a PayPal, Patreon, and crypto link in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. One last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now, we are joined by Elijah, 10th Man, Neil, Brian, John, and a whole bunch of people in Discord. So welcome, one and all.
Good morning.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Hello, everyone.
Good morning, welcome, one and all. Any evidence of a physical geometric sphere edge horizon, formerly known as Earth curvature?
No evidence, Nathan. It only is in their model marked with an X, but doesn't show up in reality whatsoever.
Nonsense.
I don't know if it's the right time to say
That's
this.
one.
We were just speaking about surveying and people's pre-assumption that it's a sphere before they do it and then they measure it flat. And Nathan, you said to me just before you went live, you said, why don't they, or something about why don't they never pre-assume it's flat and then try and measure its sphericity. That would be an interesting thing to see what would happen. That would be an interesting little demonstration. If they presume it's flat and see if they can measure any sphericity. I wonder how that would work. That'd be strange.
Well, yeah, strange, because they don't, because we can't, because we aren't. We're not on a sphere. Beyond the presupposition of a tangent plane, and then they're measuring it flat with Cartesian coordinates, that simply would not be the case and would not work if it was a sphere.
Yeah, it'd be interesting if they had to just pre-assume it's flat first, and then see if they can measure any sphericity. Because they're presuming it's already a curve before they measure anything. And then they measure it flat. Then they make a curve mathematically. But it'd be interesting to see if they just pre-assume it's flat and see how much curvature they can measure. Because we know that's going to be not.
Well, we know the method and we've
actually,
debunked it.
I disagree. I disagree a little bit. Yeah, here's why I disagree. They measure it flat. They measure a plane to get their 90 degrees so the buildings look upright, right? So since they're measuring it flat, that's telling you that they can't do it the other way around. Now, the whole thing is they have to reify it into a sphere afterwards to keep up with the model. But when it comes to the nuts and bolts, it's always measured flat, a plane, and straight. That's the only way. And that's why the sextant works the same way. That same tool is the only way to work, is to have a flat surface. It can't work because you can't have a vertex on an arc. Two lines don't meet and make a corner. You can't have a vertex, and you can't have an angle to the luminary. So just the sextant itself proves that they use that in the ocean, flat, and then they say, but I live on a ball. And what you're talking about is the same thing with surveyors. They use a plane, everything's measured from flat Cartesian references, and then they say, but we live on a ball. So the very action proves they don't live on a ball.
Yeah. What I'm saying though is, going off of what Nathan said to me, it's like a challenge for the ballers. It's like, why don't you just presume it's flat and then see if you can measure any curvature? They won't do it because it'll never happen. But they're starting with a pre-assumed it's already a sphere. They presume the curvature is already there.
We know the
then
process.
They have to measure it flat because that's reality.
We already know the process of them doing that. So the process of them doing that would be to say, you can make your example work by just saying, here you go, here's Google Earth. It shows no drop between X and Y points on this map. No drop. So here we are with it showing and measuring flat in Google Earth. No drop. So, based on the, assumption that they measured it spherical and are now showing it flat? No. Let's just take what it says. No drop. Elevation the same between these 2 points. Now go out and measure curvature. All they're going to do is assume that the horizon is a physical geometric sphere edge. So we're back to the original question. Any evidence that there is a physical geometric sphere edge, formerly known as Earth curvature? Because that's what they have to do. Assume a point in the distance that moves with the bloody weather is actually Earth curve in physicality.
Exactly.
See, the problem. The problem is like you gotta have a line of sight, right, or a tangent to the horizon being the physical Earth curve, right? But when they say it's refracted, you no longer have a line.
No, you no longer have a straight line. They're saying how bent it is, how deviated from straight, refracted it is. Well, therefore, it's not a tangent anymore. So you can never derive a straight line and a tangent point to a physical geometric sphere edge horizon when they're telling us how non-physical it is and how bent the line is to it. Bye globe Earth geometry. They debunk it when they tell us the line to the horizon's refracted.
And what kind of refraction is that, Nathan?
Terrestrial refraction, utilising the R value that initially required a tangent to be measured to a physical location they think is Earth curve called the horizon. And we're told how non-physical it is. And how the physical horizon only exists in Earth curve maths. And how we wouldn't expect to see geometry. Well, those all debunk the globe as a sphere that we're standing on. Because you'd need a tangent point to a physical horizon. You claim it blocks stuff in the distance. All your arguments start with the horizon. Hello?
Well, you know what? Isn't the black swan us actually assuming a sphere of a specific size and then measuring it not to be the case?
Correct.
That's technically what we have done.
Yeah, when we pointed out that it's begging the question to assume an R value and then make the assertion that based on the assumption of that R value, I will interfere with this particular building with the horizon that's physical at this value. And you go, oh, right, well, what happens if it's not matching with the weather that day? Oh, well, then we've got refraction. So that's where we start this argument. Them assuming R and then assuming it again with 7/6R terrestrial refraction. So we point out that's a logical fallacy. And they go, well, we already know we're on a sphere, so it's perfectly acceptable for us to automatically assume a 3959 radius value for a sphere we know we're standing on already, even though that's a logical fallacy. So then quantum erase says, okay, I'll assume it's a sphere to begin with, assert it, and then show how the geometric capabilities are breached by the black swan. And you only need one, because a hill is always going to be a hill blocking stuff behind it, regardless of the weather. Now, it can get closer, you can have fog obscure your view of that hill, but anything beyond that hill is always beyond the hill and obscured by it because of its physical parameters. Now, the hill in this example is Earth curve edge, the horizon that they think blocks things in the distance, like a hill would. That makes it physical. And they tell us at the moment how non-physical it is, thinking they've got a win when they tell us it's refracted with a geometric R value that they can't measure if it's refracted, leaving us in something known as Arwin's paradox. Hey, Arwin.
Good morning, Owen.
Yeah.
Nipped away. Go ahead, Brian.
The only reason I mentioned this was that I know exactly what would happen. Is that if we gave them the challenge of presuming it's flat, not allowed to use any globe pre-assumed mathematics or anything like that, and just see if they can measure curvature, you know exactly what they're going to do. It's exactly what you said, Nathan. They're going to start deciding that there's a dip angle to the horizon that is a physical geometric location. Then they're going to come up with the exact globe mathematics, right, that they already have. And they say, see, the globe is predicted and it came true.
Exactly.
That's what you're going to do.
Well, it's begging the question, but they utilise something you've just described, which is the affirming the consequent. If Earth is a sphere, then I will observe, insert nonsense here. I observe, insert nonsense here, therefore Earth's the assumed sphere I assumed at the beginning of this example.
Yeah, exactly. Insert nonsense here. That's exactly what they want to do.
But how dare they try to have it both ways? Like, prior to the Black Swan, as a matter of fact, happy belated birthday to the Black Swan. But how could you have it where prior to that, we spent countless hours arguing with people who would use the Earth curve calculator to say, see, look at these buildings, look at these mountains, look at that boat, look at those windmills. That is obstructed bottom up by physical Earth curve, according to this formula. And then we say, oh, look, the formula says that that physical Earth curve should start here, at this horizon distance, and it's not that distance. And then they say, oh, that's refracted. Oh, the objects are refracted. The horizon is everything is refracted. How could you be saying both things? The thing that's supposed to be blocking things all this time is no longer actually tangibly there.
Can't. It's a paradox. It's a contradiction. You can't be both non-physical refracted and physical geometric blocking things in the distance at the same time. We only have one horizon, and the horizon in Earth curve maths is physical and geometric. The horizon in reality is apparent non-physical. So the horizon is not Earth curve. It is as simple as that. And we're told by the globe side just how non-physical it is.
A guy in the past few days tried to argue with me about bottom-up obstruction. It was off someone else's video, and I was saying, yeah, the fraction limit and compression is what causes that. You can also have, obviously, mirage, exterior mirage, but most of the time it's the diffraction limit and compression will happen. And these two things weren't real. This is what I got. And then he couldn't deny the fraction, so he started having a go at me about optics, about how, because I used opticians as the optician's eye chart as an example of diffraction. when you get the letters and the numbers, and they're getting smaller and smaller. It gets to a point where you can't see them anymore. And he started saying, yeah, that's all mathematics. Mathematics prove everything, and everything they do in opticians is mathematics. And I was like, no, it's not. I said, when you get an eye test, they check your eyes, they look into your eyes, the shape of your eyes, the shape of your different parts of your eyes, and different things is going on in your eyes. And then afterwards, they can come up with some kind of an idea of what lenses you need, blah, blah, blah. But the fight, I said to him, I said, look, after a couple of few messages forward and back to him, I said, look, you don't, let's get down to the brass tacks. You don't have any reason for there being bottom-up obstruction, because you don't have a physical geometric horizon. So that's the end of that. And he came back to me with the angular resolution limit as some kind of an argument. It's like the angular resolution limit is just unbelievably similar to what your supposed globe mathematics for the horizon was. You know what I mean? It's like these people don't even realize that they're actually fighting their fight at times.
It's sort of our fight. We don't have to provide an alternative for why things disappear bottom up at the horizon. When you are correctly identified already, the horizon's not a physical point. It's an apparent location where the sky and ground appear to meet. They don't meet. That's an apparent location, not a physical earth curve edge obstruction like a hill. That's the end of the argument. Now, the fact that you were gracious enough to provide an alternative explanation isn't required. Now, the fact that he would then turn around and say, well, yeah, that's my argument. We have diffraction limits and it's optics. Like, no, it isn't in your maths, though. Because in your maths, it's only utilising actual sizes for targets. So when you're looking at a 100-foot building in the distance, it doesn't matter if the 100-foot building's a mile away, 3 feet away, or 1,000 million miles away. In your depiction, side on with the side of your own head showing in the mathematics of a globe, that building will not change when it gets further away. Like the optician's chart, however, as things get further away, they get smaller. That's their angular size. That would be optics. The apparent size the things appear to be, well, the appearance of it getting smaller is not accounted for in earth curve maths. It's always a 10-foot wall at 1 mile, 5 miles, 500 miles. It's always 10 feet. Or the building is always 10 feet. Why are 5 feet missing from the bottom of this building, you will be asked. It's like, what do you mean 5 feet? The building's really far away. Its angular size is really small. And against the deck, that limits the angle severely to the point where it can disappear through angular limitations. That would be resolution limit. Diffraction. Well, that's got nothing to do with feet and inches values you put in side view when you show me the side of my own head and compare it to a photograph. Where's the side of my own head in the photograph? Oh, right, you need to put it 90 degrees side on, show the side of my own head, so that the line between target and observer can have a whole number attached to the target, feet and inches or meters. Therefore, it doesn't change with distance. It's always the same feet and inches value, regardless of the distance you put it at, when you've got it 90 degrees side view, which is orthographic representations they use for earth curve maths. And the reason the maths is similar to the diffraction limit is because they've taken the diffraction limit, hijacked it, and called it earth curve.
Yeah, I actually was in. Sorry, just want to finish this off. What I actually was doing was defending someone else's video, and these people were attacking this person, and they're a flat earther. And I was trying to explain to them that's how it happens. And without going into the horizon and any of the rest of it, because it got so ridiculous with this person, I had to just say, look, you don't have a geometric horizon, so you don't have any, whatever your excuse is for or reason for having a problem with what I'm saying, it means nothing because you don't have anything on your side that can block things from the bottom up. I said it's all gone, and I laid out all the necessary. Don't have a geometric horizon, all the parts that were necessary to show. And the refraction, you can't even see the geometric horizon because the refraction is based off us actually seeing the geometric horizon. It's the whole paradox. I laid it all out, and and the person came back with a load of nonsense. It's like it eventually just went away because they couldn't do it and just went away. But it was like, why are you arguing with me for 3 days? 3 days it must have been, or 2 days, on this topic, when you don't have, like, you need to be focusing on what you don't have, instead of arguing with me about what is or isn't.
Exactly.
This
You no longer have a physical geometric sphere edge for a horizon. Therefore, why are you even arguing with me about your mathematics or your sphere Earth belief when the horizon's not physical anymore? The Black Swan debunked it. Your Earth curve died in 2020. That's the end of the argument. Because what are you going to come back with? What are you going to assert? Nothing. You've got nothing left. You don't have an R value, and you don't have an Earth curve edge at the horizon. Well, that's basically the sum total of your assertion that we're on a sphere. So you've got nothing then.
Can you hear me, guys?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. This is the dumbest thing the ballers do. How many times have we talked about pictures and our own experiences when we're, say, driving to a mountain and it's far in the distance and you hold up your thumb and your thumb's bigger than the mountain. As you get closer to the mountain, your thumb doesn't match the mountain because the mountain's actual size is appearing as you get closer to it. Now, when you were further away, the mountain size was still the same, but because of the distance, it looks smaller because of the deck and the angular resolution limit. Your thumb looks bigger than the mountain, but your thumb's not bigger than the mountain, you idiot ballers.
They've hijacked perspective and called it Earth curve, and they've done it by removing perspective, and the way they've removed perspective is assigning whole numbers, that would be actual size values, feet and inches or meters, to targets so that they don't change with distance. Therefore, if you draw a man on the left of a piece of paper, and you draw a wall on the right-hand side of the piece of paper, and you draw a line between them, you can write on that line 10 miles, 100 miles, 1,000 miles, and it makes no difference to the values that are ascribed to those two things. The wall will always have the same whole number actual size value. So therefore, as it gets further and further away, in reality, at probably a few miles, it would disappear from view. It's just too small. But in your Earth curve maths, well, you can see it forever. That's why the idiots on the globe side assume that on a flat Earth you'd see New York from Wales. They're just stupid. From Ireland, moreover. But, the point is they think you can see forever because in their mathematics they've excluded perspective. So they take that one step too far and say, well, why can't we see X city from hundreds, if not thousands of miles away? You're like, because it's too small. That's why.
Well, there's another variable too. The atmos and the particles in it. Like, that's why the meteorologist comes on and he tells you the weather. He tells you that, hey, this is the visibility for today. Because you can't see sometimes to the next block if it's foggy enough. How are you supposed to see through miles and miles of atmos?
Yeah, exactly. Which was my earliest explanation for it. It's like it's one of many. And they've given us lists of these explanations that we give by demonstration of how things can clutter up the air that you're looking through. Fog being the most easy to explain. Well, if you've got that, you're not going to see as far. It's just that simple. Well, in your Earth curve maths, you've only got one assertion for why things disappear into the distance. They disappear behind Earth curve. That's the only reason that you've got things disappearing at the horizon. And you can vary it slightly by utilising the begging the question fallacy of the R value that you're assuming to prove what you're assuming, and inserting it for a second time with 7/6R terrestrial refraction. All well and good 5 years ago. But now you don't have a physical geometric horizon, and therefore you don't have an R value. You can't start with the model by assuming an R value. We've debunked it. And you can't use the model to say that the Earth curve edge horizon's getting in the way of stuff. We've debunked it.
Yeah, there's no atmos or perspective or effects, visual effects of any kind in their diagrams. And so when they think about the real world, they get a diagram in their mind. So the vision they see is a diagram. And this diagram is their reality, as opposed to what reality actually is, which is our reality. So there's no atmosphere and no perspective in the diagrams.
Yeah, there's no perspective, there's no atmosphere. Not that that's begging the question as well. But atmo, I think it was Elijah who was using the correct terminology. Atmo just means air. Atmosphere is air in a sphere shape, so they can beg a few questions while they're assuming sphere-shaped air. But you're right, there's no perspective. And the way you know there's no perspective in the Earth curve maths is because the representation of the Earth curve maths shows you in the image. So this picture here, if this guy's taking a picture of that horizon, he's going to have a camera in front of him, and the image that he takes will not include the side of his own head. When you get to comparing it to Earth curve mathematics, you've got the target on the right, in this case the horizon, and the observer on the left, with a straight line drawn between them. Straight line that's later going to be bent, with the R value that's needing a geometric tangent line that's straight to derive it, paradoxically speaking. Point being that in their maths they exclude perspective by putting you into the image. When you take a picture, you're not taking a picture of the side of your own head, 90 degrees on from where you've took the picture from, with you and the target on the right. The target's in front of you, in this case the horizon, running from right to left in the image. Well, in the Earth curve maths, the horizon's not left to right in the image. It's a single point marked with an X labelled horizon at the tangent point of the Earth curve edge that gets in the way of whatever they're saying you should qualify why so many feet or metres are missing at the bottom. Even though the thing could be hundreds of miles away. Very, very, very small, right? No, it's a mountain. It's 1,000 feet. Yeah, but it's only 3 pixels in the image. It's 1,000 feet. Yeah, but I can cover that with my thumb. It doesn't matter. Still 1,000 feet. Well, yeah, that's true. But you've excluded all aspects of perspective, and when bits of it start to disappear because they're too close to the deck with the most limited angle, they'll say Earth curve got in the way. Something's physically getting in the way. That horizon that's Earth curve. And no, it isn't. No, we've debunked that with the black swan. We've also demolished the R value because you can't derive it anymore. So you can't start with your model that assumes an R. You can't bend the horizon into a different position with R. It's all dead. The horizon's not physical. You don't have an R value. Earth, as a sphere, is dead.
So basically, you're saying for the ballers, it can never be optical because they need that physical.
Precisely. Optical can be physical. You can optically, physically see a hill in the way. But as soon as the physical geometric capabilities of that hill are pushed into a different position, it's obviously not a physical obstruction. If something behind the hill isn't behind it anymore, and the hill's behind the thing it's supposed to be blocking, then it isn't a physical obstruction. If you've got a shed beyond a hill that you can see 1/4 of a mile into the distance, and it's behind the hill, you can't see it. Well, if you wake up one morning and the hill that was obscuring that shed is suddenly behind the shed, and you go, hang on, obviously what I was seeing wasn't a physical hill in the way of the shed because I can see the shed now, and the hill's behind it. Well, hills don't move. There is no physical way of moving an Earth curve obstruction that has a limit at a particular viewer height. If the Earth's a sphere with a radius of 59 miles, then every distance to horizon, the hill that obscures things into the distance according to them, can be no more than 1.22 times the square root of the observer's height in feet. That's it. That's where the physical limitations of a sphere lie, at the horizon. And if the horizon's beyond that, then we don't have a physical sphere edge. And when we point that out, they tell us just how non-physical it is, in spite of the fact they've spent 4 years straight using Earth curve maths to tell us that it's physically blocking stuff.
I think it's time to shed that argument.
Take them off the schedule.
I think, Nathan, your example, you're very, very good at coming up with very simple examples. And your example of things getting smaller in the distance and how things don't have the same size, they have an angular size as you move away from them or they move away from you, is you standing next to a lighthouse and looking straight up at up along the wall of the lighthouse, whatever it is, 100 foot high. Then you move a mile away and you're looking directly at it. 2 miles away and you're looking down towards the top of it, only because of perspective. You know, that's the only reason. You know, there's no need for anything else.
Well, as you've started this conversation, Brian, and I typically do this example with ballers that are less than cooperative, it'd be nice to have a succinct, concise back and forth on this particular subject. So I'll do it with you. Just play along. So would you concede, Brian, that if you took a brick, an 8-inch brick, and put it at a mile, there's a good chance you could just see that brick at the horizon?
An 8-inch high brick?
Just about. Let's just say, as I'm leading you that way, that you can just see the brick at an 8-inch brick at 1 mile on the horizon. You can just make it out.
Yeah, okay.
If I now take that same brick to 5 miles, would you concede that the brick is now too small to see?
Yes, absolutely.
Would you also agree that if I was to then build 100 stories on top of that brick, massive skyscraper, that the brick at the bottom would still be too small to see, but you would indeed be able to see the rest of the skyscraper built on top of that first brick?
Yes, that's exactly what would happen.
So in spite of the fact that at a certain distance, one brick at the bottom, closest to the deck, is too small to see, the rest of the bricks moving up from the brick that's disappeared with a wider angle can be seen. So you still can't see the 8-inch brick at the bottom of the building because it's too small to see and has disappeared from view at the horizon at 5 miles. But the 100-story skyscraper has a wider angle, not limited by the deck because it's higher up. Therefore, the wider angle enables you to see the larger thing, but it doesn't mean that suddenly you can see the brick at the bottom. Ergo, one brick disappeared from bottom due to angular limitations. What's that I hear you say, globe believers? Only Earth curve causes that? No. Angular resolution limit. Things get too small to see.
Yes. The 100-story high skyscraper you will be able to see, but that's only because its angular size is big enough to be able to see it. But you won't see the 8-inch brick at the bottom of that 5 miles away.
Right, too small to see. But when you take it through, when you take a baller through that example, with a lot of obfuscation usually, you can get them to the point where they can concede that something that's very far away, normally you have to push the distance further and further. So at 20 miles, you can't see a single brick. Yeah. And eventually you're at the point where you're 20 miles away building a 100 or 200-story building, because obviously you can see that even if it's really far away. You know, people have got plenty of images of buildings at a great distance, because 20 miles ain't that big, right? It's not that big a distance in real terms. You can make stuff out with the naked eye over very vast distances. People show it all the time. Well, if you can see it, but you've conceded that the brick at the bottom's too small, well, you could go into the detail of how the deck limits the angle. But why? People will just concede that things get too small to see. But you build something on top of that thing too small to see, that you can still see the thing on top of it. Doesn't mean the thing comes back. Well, that's stuff disappearing from the bottom up. And this explanation is not required. That was the whole point at the start of this conversation. Half an hour on Earth curve. I love it, Brian. The whole point of this conversation was where Brian started off by pointing out that his opponent doesn't have an Earth curve edge anymore. So what are you going to block the buildings with to assert that Earth curve's got in the way when you haven't got a physical geometric sphere edge for horizon anymore? Well, you've got nothing. You've lost, globies.
You know, their main game is to muddy the waters and drag out conversation as long as possible, because prior to the Black Swan, we would just rotate arguments. There would be Coriolis, there would be gas pressure without a container, and it would always just go into who can formulate the argument the best. Sorry for the trucks in the background. But now, no, we have the Black Swan, and it's like, no, for sure. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. That horizon is not supposed to be way back there. And we've never even talked about, well, we did, like, you know, when the Black Swan first came out, but we never even talk about the little boat or buoy that's right there. You shouldn't see that at all.
Yeah, exactly. Prior to 2020, because basically that argument is dominated by the Modus-Tollens formulation. If Earth a sphere, radius 3959, every distance to horizon can be no more than 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet, and the image just shows it not being there, it's further. So, you know, that's the end of the assertion based on the Modus-Tollens argument. But in 2019, someone would have taken the same image and said as follows: we can see too far. It's like, well, too far compared to what? When you use the Earth curve maths, beg the question of an R value and assume that the horizon's a physical geometric sphere edge, you can see further than you should based on that maths. Well, that's still playing into the wiring or the cognition that you should start explaining why things don't match with an automatic assumption of a sphere. It's Like, I don't know, before the Black Swan, we had Ranty presenting his picture of a clock. And it's like, why are we saying we can see further than we should? What's the we should bit? The we should is attached to a sphere model. And the sphere model's dictating how far we should or shouldn't see? No. There's a clock, it's 20 miles away. That's the end of the explanation. No explanation required. Just, there's a clock, it's 20 miles away. Not, there's a clock and there should be blah, blah, blah amount of Earth curve in the way. It should be blah, blah, blah behind a physical horizon. It's like, no, it's just a clock. What's that you say, Glober? No, it's a clock that's actually a hologrammatic projection of a clock from behind the reified edge of an Earth curve based on a geometric physical sphere edge horizon and an R value in these maths that show that it's behind the Earth curve but not behind the Earth curve, refracted up so you can see it as a hologram. That's my claim. What? I just see a clock. Why am I suddenly having to explain why it's not doing what a globe Earth model says it should do and describing it as a mirage because it doesn't match with some maths that you put us in side view and have the side of our own head looking at a clock? Who cares? It's just a clock. We see it because it's there. Yeah, people would have, up until 2020, started arguing about how much we should or shouldn't see of the buoy. Like, let's just forget about the buoy and the cranes. All they do is demarcate the distance between the observer and the horizon. And if they're at 9.4 miles, the furthest, then the horizon's beyond 10 miles. It's way beyond the oil rigs. So the horizon is the argument, and it totally dominates the argument, because any prior argument, prior to 2020, that is, 2019 or before, would have involved how much we should or shouldn't see based on a globe model. And they love that, because then they get to beg the question in the argument, and we argue all day long about how much should or shouldn't be there, how much refraction when assuming a globe is taking over to make it appear where it shouldn't be. Nah, your horizon's not an Earth curve edge anymore. That's the end of the model. End of R.
Well, if I may for a second, I think that by Occam's butter knife standards, I think that the globe explanation of the terrestrial refraction looming is still viable.
What, you move the horizon with respect to the horizon? That's a nonsense.
But yes.
Thank you for your input, Arwin. Useful. Very useful. Looming is moving things with respect to the horizon. Well, you can't move the horizon with respect to the horizon. Their horizon's a geometric physical sphere edge that they claim things move up and with respect to when loomed. So the horizon's moving with respect to the horizon because it's loomed above the horizon. We've only got one horizon, and the horizon in the globe Earth model is physical and geometric. And they claim refraction moves things with respect to the horizon. Not the horizon with respect to the horizon. That's nonsense. Especially not when you're using R.
It only works with the ball itself.
It doesn't work. You can't move the... It's your paradox, and I know where you're going with this, Aaron, but fair enough. You can't move an R-based horizon with R, because as soon as you do so, where'd you get the R to move it with? It suddenly becomes circular, paradoxical.
Yes. No, but I was actually trying to basically disclaim the refraction workings from a baller perspective. But maybe the horizon can be displaced in the horizon. Maybe it normally doesn't happen, but it does happen with the Earth-based, with the Earth ball. Maybe it does happen with that. Maybe that is the single exception of where it does happen.
Where the horizon moves with respect to the horizon.
Shed in the hill?
All right, go on, 10th.
Yeah, but the shed on the hill, that's still different because the hill is much smaller.
No, but the shed was behind the hill. But what you're arguing for as a baller is that the hill now is behind the shed.
What? Why would you say that?
Because you're going to move the horizon. You can't move the horizon. So since the ballers can't move the horizon...
No, not physically, but optically.
Okay, so
it's
the shed...
just that the hill is not big enough to make it seem like it's flat.
Well, let's go through it then. So if you got a shed being hid by a hill, then the hill is blocking the shed. But what the baller would say, yeah, but on certain days, the shed is in front of that same hill and the hill moved. So if the hill moved, it's no longer physical, is it?
Exactly. So on screen, Arwin, you've got it in the Hangout, right? There's a road blocked by a hill. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Now you wake up the following day and you take the same picture from the exact same location. And now this hill is over here behind the road. So the road's clear and you can see the cars going past. They're no longer blocked by the hill. The hill's now behind the road. That can't happen unless someone physically comes with an excavator, digs out the hill and piles it up behind the road. It's not a possibility in physical terms.
There might be an alternative, but if I would wake up to that, I'd quickly try and get my gas mask on, because I'm probably hallucinating.
Exactly.
But remember, you said the hill might be too small. Well, like a bigger hill isn't going to cause less obstruction, right?
Well, they tell us how much obstruction. Regardless of what they're now going to argue, if they came back to us and said, well, because it's a bigger hill, scale means that it's more likely to have refraction, bringing stuff beyond where the hill is located physically and putting where that physical location is beyond the things it should be obscuring, which makes absolutely no sense when you're using an R-based refraction that's derived the value from a measurement of a physical tangent point horizon in the first instance. So that won't work. When they say refraction, where are you getting R from? What, the physical horizon? You're moving the horizon though, aren't you? So you're telling me you're going to use the refraction value from the physical measurement of a horizon to move the horizon? Yeah, you're not going to be doing that. That makes no sense.
Right, but according to terrestrial refraction theory, let's overlook the origin of it for a moment. Let's presuppose. According to that concept, if you had a hill that is of sufficient size and you would basically enclose it in a giant chamber, hopefully transparent, and then up the pressure dramatically, but still that it would be gas pressure, not filled up with liquid or anything, then you should be able to, from one side of the hill, see the other side.
If you bend light at the rate of an R value that's requiring the horizon that you're using to measure that R value moving behind the position where it's derived from. That makes no sense also.
Well, if the hill is spherical shaped enough, yeah.
No, because the derivation of the R value in their model uses R, and that's measured from the horizon that's being moved.
I know. There's no proof that it actually works that way, but if it would work that way, then that is how it would work.
If it would. There we go.
If it did work, that's how it would work, but it doesn't work, so it doesn't work. So who cares?
Hey, I made you talk about it.
You're right. We've got 41 minutes of live show out of the first housekeeping question. That's got to be some sort of record, right?
I think we did an hour before.
You know the... Sorry, Arvin, are you finished? I think it is.
Yes.
Sorry, I cut out on you at the end there, sorry.
Come on, Brian.
Yeah,
Arwin,
hold on, Tense.
Hang on. Arwin died on the hill, that's all.
Boo-boo. Go ahead, Brian.
Thanks, Nathan. You know what ballers, the Andrew Thomas Young version of looming, which is not real looming, where objects appear above the horizon that would normally be below it. Notice nonsense. Well, I videoed what that really is. And what that was a hijacking of an inferior mirage at the bottom of something on the horizon. I videoed a ship on the horizon that was 18 miles away from me, and it was inferior mirage at the bottom, so it looked like it was floating along the top. If you were to look at it from from a position where I was with your naked eye, or even with maybe a binoculars that wasn't that strong, but because I had a super zoom camera, or I have a super zoom camera, when I was looking at it, I could zoom right to it, and you could see, and I videoed it and took stills, there's just inferior mirage at the bottom of the boat, bottom of the ship. So it looked like the ship was floating along the top, as if it was somehow miraged up there itself, but the only mirage was happening at the bottom of it. It was an inferior mirage. So they just hijacked that. But the ballers could never come up with what they termed as looming, because it became something ridiculous for them. Because like you have people coming up with super looming, then infinite over 6 looming, all this nonsense. It's like they can never come up with it because all it was just inferior mirage at the bottom of a boat or something in the distance, making it look like it's floating above the horizon.
Yeah, that's
all it was.
Well, there is a distinct, if I may, there's a distinct pattern to how this works, right? So the further you can see, the more dramatic the looming. So in those very far away side shots, that's what Rumpus deemed super mega looming. And the closer by you can see, or the less far you can see, the less dramatic the looming would be, basically.
Yes, that's an accurate way of describing their switched version of what they actually use. So what this actually involves from the globe side is what's called a bait and switch. So at some point you will end up talking, as we are now, about optical phenomenon. Well, these optical phenomenon have nothing to do with the geometry of a sphere Earth. So what they do is they talk about terrestrial refraction after detailing optical refraction. Now, their refraction is 7/6 of the radius in standard form, and they can... Brian didn't add the R value, and he detailed it a second ago. Infinite over 6R. Right, Brian? Well, that still uses the R value. So all of their claims of it being some effect that can actually be detailed in nature doesn't alter the fact that their refraction uses R. And we've debunked R. So I don't care what they call it. Call it whatever you like. It still needs R, and you don't have an R value if you haven't got a physical geometric sphere edge for a horizon to draw a tangent point to. So that's game over for your refraction claims in any form, because all of your refraction uses R.
Don't be mean. They almost have the formula ready. Nah, not by a long shot. They don't even have terrestrial refraction as a mathematical concept ready yet. I think Rumpus was going to try that like 4 years ago now. I'm not sure. But yeah, guess why it's not there? Guess why there is nothing beyond like a curvature calculator, which still just assumes the geometry, right? Why isn't there a terrestrial refraction calculator? Well, guess what? Because the formula is just unattainable. It's fractal in nature because it has to constantly adapt to explain the sides that are flat into that curve somehow. Well, to do that in a singular mathematical system is just so convoluted and complex that I doubt that even a heavy machine AI could figure it out. Because they probably would.
Even with giving them multiple media for the single medium that is the atmosphere, what it talks about is the layers vertically anyway when we're looking across horizontally. So I just don't get it at all.
Yeah, that's the 90-degree side-on orthographic representation with the side of your own head in view, where they automatically remove all aspects of perspective by giving things a whole number value. Well, they would draw infinite layers from left to right when your image wouldn't have any that were visible because you're seeing it in a completely different aspect. 90 degrees on doesn't give you that view. But they'll qualify it so that they can describe their sphere-shaped air cut up into sections and bending the light evenly at the rate of the R value they've assumed in the first instance. It's like, again, all very well and good to detail and useful when we were in the argument about it, but now they don't have an R value, so who cares? None of this is any use to them. We've debunked R.
What Arvin said there about they never came up with a 7/6 R calculator was very good, Arvin, because if they had come up with that, then they would have been found out much faster. Because it wouldn't have been, because they would have had to stick to a certain refractive amount of effect. And what would have happened is very fast it would have been shown, well, that doesn't match this observation. So straight away they're in trouble.
Yeah, but the problem would be is that to get an actual mathematical formula to account for all of the sites will make it a giant pile of code that nobody's going to be able to decipher at some point because it gets so convoluted and complex. And that would reveal that it is obviously not a natural system, that it is actually reversed engineered.
Yeah, well, I
But
mean,
the formula itself would reveal that by its sheer size.
yeah, but my point being is that they couldn't get that wrong even once. If their calculator for that was wrong even once, they were in serious trouble because this is before Black Swan. And the reason they were is that before Black Swan, they throw out all kinds of things, just like infinite over 6, or I should have said or, Nathan, you're right. Infinite over 6R, which is crazy amounts. Whereas that gave them a huge scope of BS to throw out whenever they saw an observation that didn't match what would suit their calculator, their curve calculator. But if they had a 7 over 6 or calculator, then as soon as something didn't match that, that was the end of the game. That's why they never come up with that. That was the very reason.
Yeah.
I'd go more with reverse, like what Alwyn's saying, Brian. It's that we get a picture and we look at it, and if 7 over 6R was applicable, then they'd be happy with that. But if the image obviously demonstrated, like the Isle of Man's demonstrated that this wasn't possible on ball geometry, then the default position wouldn't be to question the ball geometry. It would be, as Nathan says, to then move it into the field of optics, so that the reason we're seeing this isn't because the Earth isn't a ball, it's because suddenly now we've got looming, and then when it's even more extreme, we've got super looming. Then when we got to the pictures of it couldn't possibly be that it's not curved, it's super mega looming. There has to be another reason, optical, mathematical way to excuse the fact that none of this aligns with viewing stuff across a ball. But it's never the fact that it's not a ball, always something else. And as Arwen said, that tends to be reverse engineered from the picture. So they'll then, from the perverseness of the picture away from the ball, they'll then figure out or make up optical things that then can account for that, be that 7 over 6R or infinite, which was the obscene one.
Well,
No, I saw on the news.
Give
That's
them
the
the.
407.
It is like a spiral refraction.
I just forgot to text you though.
Hey, Mr.
Let's
Palmer.
just give them the
Hold on, Elijah.
temperature.
Hold on.
Oh,
Just one
sorry.
second, Elijah. Mr. Palmer, can you pop yourself on mute, please? If you're having a conversation in the
I thought it
background.
was.
There you go. Sorry, Elijah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, if they're saying, okay, well, we can use temperature differentials as different mediums, because that's what they're saying, right? Well, then you'll never have that set of data because you'll never be able to predict the weather. They're screwed anyway.
I think I've got a request to plug QE's show, which is at 8 p.m. UK time, 2 p.m. Central Standard Time on the Quantum Eraser YouTube channel, which will be a debate/discussion with QE versus Played NASA Shill. So be here or be sphere, 2 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. UK time on the Quantum Eraser channel.
The point I was making about the 7 over 6 or terrestrial refraction calculator is that as soon as they put that out, then they're stuck with a particular number. And just like they are with the horizon, you see, that's why they got away with the horizon for so long, because we were arguing about the refractive effects and optics with them all the time, instead of focusing on the brass tacks, which was the horizon. But if they had a 7 over 6 or standard refraction or terrestrial refraction calculator, as soon as any observation is not in line with that, then it was over straight away. That's why they never come up with it. Because if they had that, then they're stuck with to a particular number. You know, they're stuck to particular things. They put all the data in, and if it comes out wrong for what is actually seen, it's over for them. So that's why they didn't come up with that, because by not having that, it meant they could come up with all kinds of rubbish. You know, because they're not limited to a particular number on a screen.
Well,
whereas they are when it comes to the horizon.
Well, 3959 is that number. The radius value R that they assumed up until 2020 was that number. And Adam pointed out quite eloquently moments earlier with the bait and switch. Let's talk about optical things. and we'll label it. Why has it got to be labeled superlooming? Well, because it's just going to be a different value of 7 over 6R. It's just going to increase it or decrease it as necessary, and then give it an ascribed name that basically matches with something that you could actually describe. In reality, that would be looming. Well, just a more severe version of looming. And then they switch what they're describing, which is a real phenomenon, with their version of what the refraction is going to be in their geometric maths for an Earth with a sphere edge horizon. So they've substituted actual optical phenomenon for terrestrial refraction 7 over 6R, or any derivation thereof that's required at any given time, depending on the circumstances. When they're comparing pictures like the one on screen, which when taken, although this is probably CGI, when taken, include your own head. No, you're looking through a viewfinder and taking the picture. That your head's not in any way part of this image. But that's what will be in their image when they compare it to geometric sphere edge maths that exclude perspective and insert an R-based automatic assumption of the sphere that they're already assuming, refraction, called terrestrial refraction, and any variant thereof that they can describe optically to then later switch, when you're not looking or distracted, with their actual use of geometric refraction, which isn't refraction, it isn't optical, it only exists in maths, it's based on an R value which has been debunked.
Yeah, remember with Andrew Thomas Young, where from a 1 foot observation height, the horizon can be no more than 1.22 miles away. With refraction, I think it was 1.34 was the maximum. Now, we used to try to hold them to their toes to the fire on the refraction calculations that would be in the metabunk curve calculator or whatever. And they'd say, well, that's just an average, blah, blah, blah. But if they had come up with an actual refractive calculator where you could put all the temperature and all this kind of stuff in, and it didn't match, if it didn't match, especially if it started to not match consistently with what we were seeing, it was over for them. That's why I think they never come up with it, because it would have been over before we ever got to a black swan. Because they were hanging on to refraction. And when they didn't have that refractive calculator, they weren't stuck with whatever the calculator told them was real. Or should be, according to their globe, if you know what I mean.
I've renamed this show to like Earth Curve Special or Earth Curve Debunked, because we've spent the entire show talking about Earth Curve, which is epic. I love it. Any last words before we round out the live show and ask anybody watching on a Premier Ring stream to stay tuned?
Yes, the Earth is flat, just for the record.
Anyone else? Thanks, Arwin. Indeed it is. No? Well, with that, I will say, if you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Primary streams, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. I just got a super chat, so I might as well shout that out before I do round out. So perhaps we can suspend the reality is level formalities for a while in order to give ballers a chance. Oh, how sweet of you, Retro Bill. Thank you very much indeed for the super chat. Really do appreciate your support. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on either Premier Ring stream. I've been Nathan Oakley. Many thanks to both Discord and G Plus panels for making today's live show possible, and I'll see you all in the next video.
The ground in the middle of the day. when most surveying is done. Now, isn't that allowing them 6.6 times the size? What would that be?
I only caught the end of that. Are you talking about where their edge equator would be if you actually took the measurement from the black swan?
I don't think so. I'm talking about Andrew Thomas Young's paper, and it says example 2, free convection. So I guess they're trying to come up with what the radius would be given a particular set of atmospheric conditions, I guess.
Again,
and so
again, their atmospheric conditions will always be terrestrial refraction. That is their standard refraction. So what if we can? It's back to the same exact paradox. If we assume light moving around the Earth's surface, which is automatically assumed to be bent at the rate of an R value, then it could be that the horizon would be in this position to derive the R value. You've already used the R value with the refraction that you've used when you're moving it to derive it.
Right. I was saying that, but what I'm saying is, even in this paper, it only allows for the radius to be 6.6 times the 3959, whereas when we're looking at the black swan, it's much further than that.
Yeah,
it's still beyond. Yeah,
I get what you're saying, because 10th Man used to do this like a lot. Until we drilled it into him. Yeah, that's right. But you've still got to assume R to do that. And the whole purpose of the argument is that it leaves them without an R value. And you're saying, well, if we then Arwin did it as well in the show. You know, but admittedly, Arwin was quite conciliatory when he's like, yeah, I can't do that. But if I could do it, it's like, well, once you've debunked R, you can't then move the horizon with R. And that's what you're doing. In Andrew Thomas Young, that's what he's doing. He's drawing a line of sight to a physical horizon that you then are told you cannot see. So first we draw the line of sight to the geometric horizon, but we can't see it. So it's like, well, where are you getting the R value then to move it?
Can I ask a question?
The R value to calculate the amount that it's adjusting, because they're going to calculate where it is and then the differential based on R. They're still going to use the R to say how much it's out.
Exactly. It's a paradox.
So,
we had a question from Obey. I can't read that.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think it's because of the way it's written in quite a lot of the sources about how to derive refraction, that it says you can almost inflate the R value?
Yeah, with the R value.
Yeah, true. I see what you mean. Yeah, it's just they're trying to use the thing they're trying to prove what they're trying to prove.
Yeah, paradox, circular reasoning, the whole shebango. It collapses, it implodes, it fails. You can't move an R value based position with the R value, because then you're moving it to a non-physical position and you can't derive it anymore.
I know I'm doing the thing. Sorry, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, all right. The subject matter expert, Andrew Thomas Young, says all the calculations for refraction were from a plane surface. You can never do refraction of any kind off of an arc, a curve, a ball, because we don't live on one. So Andrew Thomas Young lets out a good little secret there. All of my calculations about refraction came off of a plane. But if you go to this page, we'll show you how we made it work on a sphere. So you see the trick there?
Yeah, that's part of the bait and switch. Here's examples of optical refraction and how they work. Obviously, they only work on a plane. I can't give you any examples that work on a spherical surface where the light's bending in line with the spherical surface. But based on those optical observations, we can infer that it pretty much lines up with our assumption that light bends around a spherical surface at the rate of r. So therefore, this refraction is our refraction in this maths. that's non-physical, with geometric horizons that are debunked, that give us the refraction value, that are moving the horizon with.
The irony of the whole thing is that if we did live on the ball, a big if, but if we did, then all the calculations for refraction would have been gained through living off a ball, a curved surface. But since we don't live on the ball, all the refraction calculations came off of a plane tangent, a plane surface, because that's what we live on.
Realise something. So in this show, the Google Hangout comes up in white, and the Discord server comes up in black. So all the people on the panel now are on the light side of the panel, and all the people in Discord, you're on the dark side of the panel.
As it should be.
Hey, Kiwi.
Hey, John, and welcome to the other John, to the light side. He's not here anymore.
There was something we laughed about before a couple of months ago, and we just didn't think of it, I suppose, over the years, when you had ballers like Rumpus coming in with ridiculous refractive claims involving 7/6R standard refraction, or so I'd say it's terrestrial refraction, just to keep in line with Nathan. It was that with the kind of refraction they were claiming, I mean, 7/6R terrestrial refraction would mean that we'd have daylight or sunlight all the time, everywhere, because the light would be refracted from the sunlight would be refracted, regardless of where the sun is, around everything. So it would have been that ridiculous, because Rumpus did claim that with that it is possible to see the back of your own head if you have a good enough telescope because of refraction. So, and you have Ruhuf coming up with infinite over 6 refraction. You know what I mean? It's so ridiculous that if that was a real thing, even if we're on a globe, that would mean on a full moon night, with the light of the sun being everywhere and the full moon, then it would just be too bright to drive, and everyone would have to walk around wearing sunglasses in the nighttime.
No, hold on, because it's still being absorbed, though. But yeah, infinite over 6R refraction would technically mean a spiral, like an infinite inward spiral-like refraction effect, which is kind of preposterous. That it could just go on forever, in bending forever, like that.
Not to mention that they don't have an R value anymore.
And that light rays don't, and that infinitely narrow rays do not exist.
Elijah, I know we poo-pooed it, but can I just clarify what he's saying? Because it's sounding a bit like one of QE's gas pressure things. Even if I let you have gravity, it doesn't affect gas behavior. So are you saying that even if I let you have 7/6 or super, all of the parameters, if you set them to maximum bend, as it were, still means it would not, that image in the black swan would not be permissible? The geometric horizon would still be blocking the things, because you've got 6 times 1.2. So the second platform would still be...
You're encouraging this.
Yeah, the horizon, it would still be closer than where it is.
Yeah, that's right. But like with 10th Man, let's just calm down. I'll stop getting frustrated. Just take a breath. So let me get this straight. So QE comes up with an argument that debunks their automatic assumption of the R value. And upon debunking the automatic assumption of the R value, and therefore debunking the entire premise and notion that we're on a sphere, you're then going to say, but if we give it you back immediately, is that right?
That sounds like what it is, but on the premise that you're going into their playground, aren't you? You said, all right, I'll step into your playground, but even if I step into your playground, it's still not sufficient. It's still not sufficient.
because they don't know what they're arguing, right? So they don't know that they don't have a tangent if they have light being bent. They also assume that light travels forever, and they're light rays that are just bending around the presupposed curvature of the Earth. Even with all of this, assuming that there's multiple mediums because of temperature differentials, even with all of that, they still have nothing.
Well, I think you're giving them too much credit, because I don't think they're thinking about all that. I think they're just thinking about how can we clay and maneuver everything into that ball, and that's what they're fixating on, not the actual consequences.
But see, I'm getting my information from their priests. What they're supposed to be believing in, they don't even understand. That's the whole point. Like they're just making shit up.
But their belief is centered around trying to reify the ball, and they don't really care about the existential consequences of the machinations they introduced. They don't really care, as long as it is sufficient to convince you that the Earth is a ball after all.
Exactly.
Look,
So it
that's
doesn't.
what Elijah's saying.
Exactly.
It isn't. Even if
they're basically implying that the weather can move locations to another place.
With R.
I had them earlier with the question. I said, will the weather ever make the distance from home to work further or shorter? And of course not. But that's kind of almost what they're implying.
Sort of. In their bait and switch, they're taking weather or the effects that we observe in nature, and then they're bait and switching you, because they're then using R, 7/6 of it, in every single one of these examples. Now, I get what Adam's saying, and he's backing Elijah and saying, no. Even when we step into the playground, and I'm going to say stepping into the playground, what you mean if the Earth's a sphere radius 3959, we'll beg the question with you. That's sort of stepping into their playground. So we're in their playground when we assume radius 3959 sphere Earth in modus tollens for the Black Swan. And as soon as we demolish it, whilst in their playground, you're like saying, well, no, they've got another separate playground where, even though that doesn't work in this big playground, we just run into another little small hut where we decide to ignore everything that goes on in our own playground and tell you that, no, we haven't got a physical sphere edge for a horizon, because if I assume a physical sphere edge horizon, I move the horizon with the R value that was used. None of this makes sense. Why give it them back? It's dead.
May 10th man redeem himself. Since we're on it, may 10th man redeem himself.
Please.
Okay,
well, you are on the light side.
We use, just let me get it out. Black Swan in a debate, the only thing I ever use. Because it's a debate, just kill it right there. But even when we use the Black Swan, we have to use their 1.22. So we're actually using their 1.22 to show the Black Swan's argument is beautiful and there is no sphere, no radius. However, in Andrew Thomas Young's work, he's got another number. The 1.22 is without refraction. His refraction number is 3.2. I can interchange it. I can say, even if I use your 3.2, Black Swan is over 10 miles out. You lose with refraction, you lose without refraction. There is no globe with a radius. That was my argument.
I know it was your argument, but taking that step is to give him back the radius value, so you can say, even with your radius value based refraction that I've just debunked the radius of, you can't move the radius to get the radius into a different position by way of a different value that uses the radius. You've debunked radius. That's the end.
But to debunk radius, I have to use their 1.22.
It's not 1.22.
What's that?
It's not their 1.22.
But it is the number we use.
It's geometric.
Yeah, not theirs. And when you said 3.2, are you talking about 3.2 over R?
I don't know.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Yes, indeed.
Well, let me answer. I'm reading it out of Andrew Thomas's junk writing. His junk writing says 1.22, and we use that all the time. But right after that, he says if you apply refraction, it's 3.2 something. I can't remember.
Yeah, but the 1.22 is not his. That's just basic geometry. That's not his.
Okay, but he still uses it, and his name's on it, saying that's what the radius should give us.
Yeah, but when you invoke refraction, you're invoking terrestrial refraction, giving them back the R. That's what Nathan's saying.
Yeah, but I don't give him back the R because I'm coming from. Oh gosh, if I'm saying it from a context of your bogus writing is so bogus that even your refraction is bogus.
Sorry, 10th man, we're gonna have to confiscate that R. We're not gonna.
But allowing them refraction doesn't that make their horizon not physical?
We're already begging the question, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a double beg.
Both ways.
Yes.
Can I say something to
It's not a double begging the question. Terrestrial refraction without the debunk of the R would be begging the question twice. But once you've debunked the R, it's then incapable of being utilised to beg the question for the second time. So if you let them beg the question of a sphere-shaped Earth in their maths, and then they beg the question again with R, then they can do that within their double your trouble begging the question fallacy that is the Earth curve maths. They cannot do it once you debunk R, because they no longer have a physical geometric sphere edge for a horizon to derive R to move the horizon. So you can't let them have it, as you put it.
I couldn't agree with you more, and that's not what I'm doing. You're misinterpreting what I'm doing. What I'm doing is saying R is dead, it's over, so it's over. Now they come and say refraction, and I said, no, R is dead, it's over, it's over. And then it's at a point where Andrew Thomas Young comes up, right? And so then you say, well, why are you saying what you're saying? Even your high priest with refraction screws up. It's dead. It can't work at all. That's what I'm saying. Even
this is his diagram, right? This is Andrew Thomas Young's diagram on screen for the audience and for the people in G+. Well, this dotted line between O and G is a line that he describes as a line that you can't see. He also describes it as having a line of sight. And the reason it's got a line of sight is because G to C is the R value, derived by Al-Biruni. So you need to be able to see a straight tangent line to G from O to derive R, which is G to C in this diagram. Well, he's saying we can't see it, but we're going to move it to H because we've got an R value from the dotted line that we can't see anymore. It doesn't make any sense. It's already dead, and you're saying, well, in the argument, I say...
that hits me a lot harder, yeah. I get what you're saying.
Can I make an example? Right, that Ted, you're right when you say that even if you give them refraction, it doesn't matter because it's still nowhere near what we see in Black Swan. But the problem is, they're arguing that the wheels on their car, even with flat tires, can go a certain distance. But once you take them wheels off, there is no tires to have a flat tire. So it's like when you take the wheels off and then argue about refraction, you put the wheels back on and then flatten the tire and show that it still will only go a small bit and not make the 10 miles. But you've taken the wheels off with the 1.22, not being a reality. And
Agreed.
Just let me finish. Just 1 second. Once you put back on them wheels and flatten the tires, you will prove that even with the refraction calculations, it's still anywhere near what reality is showing. But you have to put those wheels back on to show that.
Why do you think? Why do you think I'm putting any wheels back on?
Just
I'm not
hold on,
putting
Ted.
any wheels back on.
Hold on. It's a good analogy if you just slightly alter it, Brian. I love it. So you've got a car that's broken down, and then while you get out the car and roll out your phone and phone for somebody to come and fix the car, all the wheels get stolen. Now that's us destroying the R value. The wheels are the analogy with R. The wheels are R. So you come along and all the wheels get taken off the car, and the guy on the phone says, well, I can't tow your car away because I need the wheels to be on the car to tow the car away. And the guy says, no, I've still got an R value, a spare tyre. I can just put one on because I've still got a spare tyre. In other words, I can still use R. No. You need R to be the foundation of the car's structure for it to roll. The fact that you can still pull out a spare and say, well, I can still assume R, you can, but it won't make the car roll anymore. So it's game over. The car's never rolling again, even though you can still assume R. That's the equivalent of still having a spare tyre in the trunk.
Very nice. And that's what I'm doing. Let me try one last time.
Analogy there, actually.
Let me try one last time to get it through. Andrew Thomas Young gives 3 statements on this subject, and all of them are wrong because R is destroyed with the black swan. 1.22 is wrong. The 3.2 something is wrong. And the other one where he says you don't have a straight line to even measure. No, let me finish. I'm not saying it in the way you're saying it in the GM.
Not wrong. You're using the wrong numbers.
I'm not saying geometry. I'm saying the way he's using geometry.
Geometry, 1.22.
Had breakfast yet?
I am not arguing the geometry. Okay, forget it. I'm not arguing the math or the geometry. I'm arguing the way Andrew Thomas Young is
Oh
using
my Nathan, can you translate for me?
I could still not finish.
But don't blame me. Don't ask. Get Elijah to do it. This is all his fault.
You didn't let him finish.
What?
I think I can
the
help.
first time you said it. Now this is the 3rd time.
He's wrong with the straight tangent line that he doesn't have. He's wrong with the way he uses the 1.22 is what I'm saying. I'm not saying he made it up, but he's wrong in the way he uses it and applies it. And then he's wrong when he applies the refraction with the 3.2. He's wrong on all 3 because R killed it all. I'm coming back and watching the buzzards eat the whole thing. And I'm commenting on the buzzards eating the whole thing because I don't destroy it with those 3 things. I destroy it with the black swan.
Okay, what are the 3 things that are wrong?
The way he uses 1.22 from geometry.
There we go again.
Well, if the Earth is a sphere with a radius of 3959, the 1 foot observer height, the horizon can be no further than 1.23 miles. He's wrong about that.
Why?
He's not.
You know why he's wrong about that? Because it doesn't show up and it doesn't apply to this plane we live on.
That's how the sphere is debunked.
He's right, but it's not what we observe.
Exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what John Quantum Eraser is saying. Yes, it's not what we observe, but the geometric constraints as detailed. If the Earth's sphere radius 3959, every distance to horizon can be no more than 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet. That is a factually accurate statement.
Correct.
The fact that it's not doesn't change that is just the geometry. And you're saying, well, he's using it wrong. It's like it doesn't matter how he's using it. Now, when you go on to detail how it's wrong, it's like that doesn't change the geometry either. This is one dude asserting nonsense.
Yeah, sir, please open your bags. We have reason to believe you are smuggling ours.
Did you want the last word on this, John, from Discord, or father of a stolen child?
Well, yeah, I was going to try to explain to 10th that arguing within the begging the question fallacy after it's been proven wrong is just indulging absurdity. But I think he understands that.
Exactly, that's my point, which is why I've kind of jumped all over Adam and for a long time 10th Man and today Elijah, because why bother debunking the R value if you're just going to give it straight back to them and say, well, even when you use it, I'm going to now debunk your R value that you've used in this begging the question fallacy, because then they'll just sidetrack you and use that all day long and argue about how the reuse of the R value that's been debunked is correct. It's like, no, just nip this in the bud. It's dead. The wheels have come off the car. There's no going back. That's it. Accept it. Not, well, we could pretend that we've got some wheels. No, it's dead. The Black Swan killed it. With that, I'm going to say a huge, massive, enormous thank you to both Discord and G Plus Panels for making today's after show possible. And of course, a massive thank you to all of you in either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Premiering streams for hopefully smashing the super chat, liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, and joining as a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!